Hi, thanks for joining me for what is going to be a very short demonstration of a stored procedure that I've written called SP Cascading Data Viewer. This stored procedure basically allows you to find out a little bit more information about the data in your database and see how much data that is existing in the database that is tied back to a particular value in a particular table. Okay, so if I open up my template for SP Cascading Data Viewer, you see what we essentially capture is a value for the number of rows. So given a value or a collection of values in a table, SP Cascading Data Viewer basically tells us the number of rows in the database that are dependent on that value. And the way it does that is to look at all the foreign keys in the database that link back to the table that we're analysing. That will make a bit more sense when I actually show you it in a minute. So we're going to analyse a table in our AdventureWorks DW 2008 database. So I'm going to drag that in there. And the table that we're going to analyze is this one called dim product subcategory. So I'm going to drag it into my table name. We actually put DBO, add the DBO schema into a dedicated parameter there. We're going to look at a column called English product subcategory name. So I'm going to drag it into our @p filter calls parameter. And the actual value that we're going to look at is, well, we might as well pick one. Let's have a look and see what's actually in this table. Okay, let's take the top one, mountain bikes, that will do fine. And let's take a look at the actual value when it comes back to us. Okay, so what it's going to do is go into that table, loop over all the foreign keys in the database, link back to that table, and just tell us how many rows in the database are actually dependent on that value on the rows in that table that have the value mounted bikes in the column English product subcategory name. So let's hit F5 on that. And straight away it returns back to us 17,357 rows. So we know there are that many rows in the database that are dependent on mountain bikes in that column. So if we wanted to, for example, get rid of any rows in dim product subcategory with the value mountain bikes, then we would have to delete 17,000 rows from our database, because that's the number of rows that are actually dependent on that. If we actually want to look at the data, we can do that as well. We have a parameter called show data. That's just not true, that's 1, sorry. If I hit this again, and here we go, let's take a little bit of a closer look at this. So we have one row in dim product subcategory, which is the table that we actually started from, which has the value of mountain bikes, as we'd expect. And then we find that in dim product, we have 38 rows that actually refer to that category of mountain bikes. In our fact internet sales table, we have 4,970 rows, and that links back via the dim product table. Fact reseller sales, we have 7,000 rows in there. Going a bit further, and in our fact internet sales region, we have 4,861. If we add all that up, we get the 17,357 rows in total. So that is a very short demonstration, really, of what SP Cascading Data Viewer actually does. Now that in itself is pretty useful, but it becomes more useful when we use a stored procedure to analyse all of the values in a particular field. And the way we do that is we've got another template down here, which calls the second stored procedure called SP Cascading Data Viewer Table Wrapper. And in this case, it's pretty much what it does is loop over the same column in the same table in the same database, and it calls SP Cascading Data Viewer for every distinct value in that column or collection of columns. So let's set it up exactly as we did before. So we're going to look at, again, our AdventureWorks DW 2008. Dim product subcategory. We need to put schema into a parameter of its own. And we were looking at English product subcategory name. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Here we go. Okay, and that's it. And what we'll get out of SP Cascading Data Viewer Table Wrapper is a result set that shows us the distribution of all of the values in that particular field. The distribution will be determined by the number of rows that are dependent on each single value in that column. So I'm going to hit F5, and let's see what happens. This is going to take a little bit longer to run because we have, so we have 37 rows in this table. So it's going to call SP Cascading Data Viewer 37 times. And okay, we've got a result set back. That took 10 seconds to run. And what we find is that tyres and tubes is the most popular product subcategory in our database, going by the number of rows in the database that are dependent on tyres and tubes, i.e. that have some sort of foreign key link back to that particular value. And we capture a number of things here. We capture the number of rows, which is the first thing we're talking about, from Cascading Data Viewer. Cascading Data Viewer Table Wrapper also captures the time it actually takes to get all those values for each particular iteration. And for each of those two measurements, it calculates that value as a percentage of the total number of rows captured. So if we were to sum up all of these values, that would be, all of these values, that would be the total number of rows in the database that are dependent on some value in dim product subcategory .english product subcategory name. And percentage of total rows gives that number as a percentage of the total. Pretty similar for time to cascade. We take the total sum of time it took to cascade over all those things and provide each value as a percentage of that total. So the real interesting thing is the number of rows and the percent of total rows, and we get them in descending order as well. We can actually define the order that we get them in, because we have a parameter called ascending. So if I set that to 1, we should get them in ascending order. So that should take about 10 seconds again. Coming through any second now, hopefully. And this will give us exactly the same data, but in this case, we get them in ascending order of number of rows. So that's the basic premise, and this is quite useful because it allows us to see all of the values in that particular field, in that table, that are used, and how often they are used in our database. Now, in addition to that, I have actually produced a report which will give us, in reporting services, which will give us the same information, but it will actually visualize it for us on the chart. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to pick AdventureWorks DW 2008. I'm going to pick my dbo.dim product subcategory table. I'm going to pick English product subcategory name again. It's already selected for us. I must have run this just before. We'll select it there. And we pick that we want it in descending order. I click View Reports. This should take about the same length of time to run again, about 10 seconds. Coming through any time now, hopefully. And there we go. We get a report showing us the distribution of the number of rows, number of dependent rows for every value in dim product subcategory .english product subcategory name. Okay, that's the end of the video. I hope that gives a good overview of what you can actually do with SP Cascading Data Viewer. And if you've got any feedback, I'd really love to hear it. Thank you very much.